Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU, the podcast. Welcome to MotivationU, the podcast. Again, I'm Bob Ganzak. We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill at Celebration Point inside the Coach's Podcast Room. And with me today are special people. Very, very, very pleased to have both of you with me, Rabbi Goldman and Chanie.
Correct.
I'm glad I got that right. I don't. And we're here to talk leadership. A little bit about our podcast it's about leadership, finding those individuals that make a difference in people's lives. And that's why when Freddie Wiebe called me and asked me if I would love to have you on, I was like, yes, people that make a difference in people's lives. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bob, for having Chanie and I. And if you aced the name, sometimes it's difficult, but think of Hanukkah or Hanukkah, so think of Chanie. It's easier that way, but it's an honor to be hosted by you and your audience. And it's high expectations for us to meet that standard of service and excellence that your audience deserves.
Well, there's so many things to talk about, and when we talk about leadership, it comes in so many different angles, and we were kind of sharing some ideas before the podcast started. How long have you been in the Gainesville area yourself?
We moved here, our first visit was in 1999. We moved permanently in May 2000, but we've been a little over 22 years now.
Wow.
Or coming up on 22 years of service here in the Gainesville and UF community.
And I want to add something about leadership, because we're part of the Chabad movement, which is a sect within Judaism. And our leader and mentor, the Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, it was said about him that he didn't want to have followers, he wanted to create leaders. So even though he had thousands and thousands of followers, he wanted each follower to become their own leader. So that's really the mantra that we follow, that the people who we service or come to our center, we want to help them become leaders as well.
All right.
That's attributed to the great rabbi of blessed memory, Jonathan Sacks, who said he was in such awe and influenced by the Rebbe, and he said that most leaders, again, I don't want to butcher the quote, but I believe he said what Chanie mentioned, that most leaders create followers, the Rebbe created leaders.
What was the process that he employed to make those leaders?
So that's a great question. He empowered his followers that they should become their own leaders by sending them out or by giving them the responsibility to create Jewish centers around the world. And he created actually 3,000 Jewish centers, anywhere from Nigeria to Alaska. You know, we go to these different cities and help empower the people who live in these cities to embrace their Judaism and become leaders within their community. So it was this, I guess, cycle of him, the rabbi creating leaders, and then us creating these leaders as well. And like I said, his leadership wasn't about a bunch of people just following him around. It was about these followers becoming leaders themselves.
So in the business world, we look to do that. I mean, we hire people and hope that we can cultivate a culture that develops those leaders. It does not happen all the time, unfortunately. You probably could say it rarely happens in a lot of institutional businesses. What are the characteristics that you look for in individuals or that you cultivate to see that they have that leadership ability?
That echoes a great question again. But to step back a little bit, to understand, so to speak, to look at the world and the vision of the Rebbe through his world and eyes, we have to remember the time period where the Rebbe assumed leadership from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe dynasty of 7 Rebbes of blessed memory for the worldwide Lubavitch Chabad movement. Actually, it's interesting, maybe some of the viewers are wondering, Lubavitch is the city in Russia where the movement settled, so to speak, where the movement is from. It's a little town in Russia called Luba, which actually means city of love, known as Lubavitch. That's why, hence, we're known as the Lubavitcher Hasidim, the Hasidic sect of Lubavitch. And there are many Hasidic sects from Hungary, from Poland, from Russia, so on and so forth. And Chabad is the philosophy, so to speak. It's an acronym for the words Chachma, Bina, Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which is, so to speak, the path of which a chassid in general, a chassid, which actually literally means the pious one or a pious one, would follow in their service, in their avoda, in their life, in their service to God. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, that we are his shluchim, emissaries, or followers, assumed leadership in 1951 after the passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, his father-in-law. And it was coming from the darkest time that we know of in Jewish history, which is, post the war, the World War II and the Holocaust, where a renaissance of Judaism, or for a lack of a better word, a rebirth, so to speak, needed to take place. And Jewish people themselves didn't believe or would never foresee the possibility of Judaism being rebuilt around the world, in the United States, or for that matter, Europe and anywhere else. And so the call of the hour, or the time that God blessed the world with the Rebbe's presence and the Rebbe's leadership, is so essential to this story of Chabad, Lubavitch, the Rebbe. And really what's most important is the purpose and mission that he set forth for his followers, or for that matter, the world. The Rebbe had a very wide, awesome vision. The Rebbe encouraged world peace. The Rebbe encouraged 7 no-hide laws, moral and ethical standard for all mankind. So the Rebbe was, so to speak, burdening the responsibility for the Jewish people moving forward to the time that we are in now and forever, and rebuilding the Jewish people from the ashes of the war, literally. And then the Rebbe took upon himself, or was endowed in a spiritual sense, with the responsibility to bring the world to an era of perfection, peace. Jewish people refer to it as a new time in this presence, the coming of Mashiach, where we believe there will be world peace, no more hunger, no more war. And as we speak right now, there are Russian soldiers on the border of Ukraine, where the Rebbe and Lubavitch is from, again threatening to enter. So that time is not here yet, but you see the need and the effort. And there are good signs in the world as well, the advancement of medical science and charity and all the things to bring the world to a perfection and a vision that Judaism had, Torah had, but the Rebbe revealed it in a way that had never been done before. So to try to circle back to your question and not get lost in the history necessarily of Lubavitch per se, how did the Rebbe select leaders, or what's the qualification of a leader? I believe to be in tune with the call of the hour and the Rebbe's mission and presence, and how he foresaw and visualized a world perfected would be a good indicator as to who can carry that message forward. If you're in tune with the message, or you're in tune or endowed with the responsibility, and you're willing to share that burden. And I just want to conclude with one more thought, and Chanie probably will echo a lot more than that as well, in his first talk in 1951, a year to the date after his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, passed away, if you look back in the text of his talk, in the first Hasidic discourse and gathering of him officially being the Rebbe of Chabad Lubavitch, and they're synonymous, like we spoke before. You'll always hear Chabad or Lubavitch Chabad, the city where we're from, the philosophy that it represents. So he spoke about this vision and call of the hour, and he told the few people gathered, until he physically passed away in 1994, it built up to tens of thousands of people would seek his counsel and guidance and gather to hear his hours-long talk, each gathering of the Rebbe. If you look at the first 1951 talk of when he assumed leadership, you see the clear mandate, so to speak, and vision. And he tells the people gathered, it is not going to be easy. If you think I'm going to be a Rebbe that's just going to sit here and pat you on the back, just paraphrasing, that's not what we're all about, or what the call of the hour is, to go out and, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph. And the Rebbe got very serious and spoke very emotional about the need for the Jewish people's revitalization and growth and rebuilding of the Jewish people, the need spiritually for this effort to occur for the betterment of the Jewish people as well as for the entire world.
Wow, that's Chanie.
So I want to just add about leadership. And I think the secret to the Chabad movement is that the Rebbe gave people confidence in themselves. Because in order for a leader to be successful, they can be very creative and smart, or even good with people. But if they don't have that confidence that they can do it, then they're not going to be successful. And he gave this confidence. He gave us this confidence, and in general, it wasn't. I just want to add, it wasn't just the Jewish people. He met with Robert Kennedy, for example. He met with many different politicians, including presidents. And one specific story, which I think really brings out this point of giving confidence to people to become leaders. The first African American representative to Congress, and I believe her last name was Abrams. She was from the district where the Rebbe lived in Brooklyn. And he congratulated her when she was elected. And at some point, he got wind of the fact that she was very disappointed that she wasn't put on a respectable committee, because at that time an African American woman wasn't really respected. She was put on the agriculture committee, and she felt like, I was elected to Congress and they're putting me on the agriculture committee. And the Rebbe found out about this, and he called her in and he asked her to come for an appointment. And he told her, look at the positive and look at how much you can actually accomplish. The agriculture committee can be used for a positive way. And he said there's so many farms out in Kansas and so many farmers who have surplus corn and surplus wheat, and there's so many mothers and children who have no food in our own district. Why don't you find a way to connect both? And she said it happened to be she was in Congress at some point, and she met with Bob Dole. She happened to have a meeting with him, and they happened to get into conversation. And Bob Dole was talking about all these farmers in Kansas who have all this surplus corn. And she all of a sudden remembered what the Rebbe told her: surplus corn in Kansas can help the children and mothers in Brooklyn. And his confidence in her gave her this push, which eventually caused her or created the whole WIC program. So the WIC program was the Rebbe telling her that she was able to take what was given to her and become a leader and create a program that, to this day, helps feed so many mothers and children around the world. So that's just an example of giving confidence to a person to use what they have in their leadership abilities.
And steering them in the right direction. How about the individuals that don't step up to that leadership role? How are they treated, and do they become just part of the quote-unquote flock, or how do you give up on them because they didn't show leadership skills early on? What is that development process like?
Well, we work with students mostly, and you see that you see with young people that there are those who really show the qualities of leadership, and there are those who have the qualities of leadership but again don't have the confidence really to show it or to really take advantage of it. And then there are some who don't necessarily have the qualities of leadership, but they have qualities to be successful in some way or another. So within our organization, and we have something called the Lubavitch Chabad Student Group, we try to give each of the students some kind of job that can empower them to be successful. Not every person is going to be a leader, is going to run an organization, is going to be, super successful like by American standards. But everyone can accomplish something in their own way, whether that means being in charge of cooking the food for Thursday night. We have a big Shabbat dinner because they like cooking. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're this big leader, but they're able to be in charge and, gather students around and give them instructions on how to cook. So you have to find, and, as parents of children, we have 8 children, thank God, we kind of have that experience, or, we're working on it to empower our children as well as our community to find whatever talents they have and use it for the benefit of themselves and the community.
Yeah. And that's 100% true, and it draws back again on the Rebbe's inspiration to galvanize and bring out the potential in every individual. And the story that Chanie shared, there's so many other stories where the Rebbe would go straight to the heart of the matter with an individual and trying to strengthen their talents or skills, try to motivate them to emphasize those as opposed to, setting up a person or a situation for failure. I'm not going to start mentioning individual stories because there are so many, but this was the theme all along, that every person is equally a chelik elakama mamamish. It says in the Torah, in the Bible. I don't want to sound like a Bible-thumping rabbi and boring everyone in the South. We have enough of those. But ultimately in Genesis it says that God created man in his image, and therefore each person is, first of all, connected to each other, as well as a part, in a sense, of God himself, okay? And therefore, the totality of humanity, the totality of mankind, the totality of the world at large is interconnected with each other as human beings, and the purpose of man and each individual has its role in fulfillment. And you could bring it down to the most basic honest level, the way Chanie was expressing it, that in each organization, each company, in each corporation, each school, you have the headmaster, or as we say in Brooklyn, the principal, or we have the administrator, and you have the custodian, and each one plays an essential part for the program to work, for the company to be successful, for the children to be educated, for the synagogue to run, so on and so forth. But each person has their essential role that without the other, the community, the world, and the purpose collectively is not fulfilled. And if we can motivate and inspire each individual with their limited talent or with their ultimate or unlimited talents, and each one is blessed by God with their set of potential, to inspire them to see their role as equally important and essential for the world at large and for them as a fulfilling person, would be in a much better society, and everyone would be playing, so to speak, their part.
We're here with Rabbi Berl and Chanie Goldman, and we're talking about leadership, a lot of different things. Rabbi, you're obviously a very astute student of the Word, and you mentioned that we were built in His...
Created in His image.
His image.
That's what it says in the Torah.
Stay with me on this.
Sure.
Is that how we got to the point where most of the leaderships in all congregations of different churches are men? Why don't we have more leadership of women at the, I'm a Catholic, priests. Nuns were basically subservient. What is the background of that, and why have we never been able to break through that?
I'll take this because I study a lot about feminism within Judaism. And first of all, I want to just
Thank
I
you,
guess,
Connie, for taking that brick off my shoulder.
Because I deal with this question, I guess, even probably, more than you do. So first of all, I'm going to speak about a misconception. It says in the beginning that people think that Eve was created out of Adam. It says Adam was put to sleep, the biblical story, and Eve was created from Adam's rib. But it actually says in the Torah, in the Bible, it says that God created, in his image, God created him, and then it says God created them. It says the verse twice. And the reason is because God created him. Him is not necessarily male. It's just telling us that God created one being. And then God took this one being and he divided the being into two people. He divided the being into male and he divided the being into female. So God did not actually make a man and take the woman out of the man. God created one being and half of it was male and half of it was female. So I just wanted to give that as a preface to the fact that the men weren't created first. They're not necessarily deemed as the more important. Just somewhere in history that became the version of events.
Just like many things.
Yes, just like many things, human beings
Say a Bubba Mice 100 times, it becomes truth. Say a fairy tale 100 times, it becomes reality.
Yes. Well, we tend to, everything that was written as the word is through the years interpreted by humans.
Yes.
And so we shift it, we make it work for us, we kind of interpret it differently depending on, who won the war or what happened, right? That's how history is. Why have we never got to the point where there's an equality in that leadership in religion?
Okay, I wanted to just finish what I was saying before. And when you say in God's image, he created them, there are many different terms of God. If we speak about Kabbalah, which is the more spiritual aspects of Torah, there's the female names of God or the female references to God, and then there's the male references to God as well. So if you're asking why did it say in his image he created them, it's because in that specific situation, for whatever reason, and for many reasons we're not going to get into, it's speaking about the male aspect of God. And there's other versions in the Torah, the word Shechina, which means divine presence, is the female aspect of God. So when we speak about the aspects of God or the way God is represented in this world, there's the female aspects and the male aspects. But, there for many generations, there was men who controlled the world. And I think, we speak about the Rebbe's view on the world and coming to the time of like a messianic age or a world's more tolerant. This is bringing about the female, bringing us more in tune with the female aspect of godliness. And that's why now women, it's a fight, but women are able to assume more and more aspects of leadership or positions of leadership. And as far as why there aren't more women in the clergy, so from a Jewish point of view, we see that everyone has their own job or their own position in this world. And it's not necessarily that women aren't good enough to be in the clergy, it's that women have other responsibilities or other jobs within the clergy, but it's not necessarily that they're supposed to be, the rabbi or that they're supposed to be the one who is, in charge of prayer services and other things that is relegated to men. But, so that's just a small, very short, the Judaism view.
A glimpse,
Cliff notes.
a glimpse into this very important and vast subject. I don't know about deep, vast subject. That's a fair subject that needs to be explored and, more importantly, understood. Like Chanie was saying, the Kabbalah or the esoteric parts of Torah will reveal a lot more of the attributes of God that she was mentioning, whether they're in feminine form, masculine form, and what they actually mean in terms of his, meaning Almighty God's energy, and so to speak, our purpose and role as well. And this question and conversation, this particular last few moments about the role of women and men in the clergy, in all fairness, so to speak, about what's happening in society at large and always has, is equally relevant to the corporate world, to the sports world, not exclusive to the clergy.
Oh.
And I'm not taking it personal.
But that's where I come from, that corporate world, and I just wanted to find out, because I've been a big cheerleader for women in business. I when I first became a sales manager in the radio industry for a radio station in Michigan, in Lansing, Michigan, there were 7 men and 1 woman on the team. Within about a year and a half, it was totally flip-flop. I was interviewed by magazines from radio, like, what are you doing there? Because this is a man's world. And,
how dare you?
Well, one of the things that came to me was that to be a great salesperson, you've got to be a good listener. Women tend to be better listeners in my estimation, especially in the business world, and they tend to nurture more and listen. Also, you have to have more empathy versus sympathy, and women tend to be more empathetic, men tend to be more sympathetic. They'll get caught up in the, I can't pay my bill. Oh, all right, pay it next month. Where this woman would be like, I understand that. We all have challenges. I still need to pick it up. When I can pick that up, It's that assertiveness and so it was natural for me to hire those type of individuals, and our business grew
exponentially.
Oh,
I'm sure. We need to draw back historically to the Torah itself and throughout Jewish history in regards to the woman's leadership and role. And like Chanie said, many things, what is known is not necessarily what the reality is or what the truth is or what the Torah teaches.
Or what does equality actually mean? Does it mean we're all doing the same thing?
Right. And I just want to mention a few highlights. If you look at the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the stories, many most crucial junctures in world history, specifically in Jewish history, was in the merit of the righteous woman, was in the merit of the prophetess at the time, which had, there were prophets, prophetess. There were our mothers, the Jewish mothers, similar to the Jewish fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are highlighted as well. Sarah, Rachel, Rivka, and Leah, not only highlighted, but their essential role in the story of the creation of the world, the birth of the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, and everything that followed. And the same Torah, the same Bible, also because of historical aspects and how the Jewish woman persevered and nurtured the Jewish people through the exile, and as our most famous exile, the Exodus, the exile of Egypt, and then the Exodus of Egypt, all took place in honor and in thanks to the Jewish woman who kept the family together and nurtured the values to bring us to that time. We don't have enough time to go into the story and all the details that ensued for this to take place. But it says that in the merit of the women and the fact that the Israelites kept their names and their clothing, we were redeemed because of the righteous women at the forefront. And throughout Jewish history, that took place as well. And in the Bible, historically, you see the leadership and the essential role equally, so to speak, to the men. Now, in reality, like Chanie mentioned, the actual role that Almighty God selected them for or with might have been different, similar to the other examples that we gave, but they are highlighted important, essential, and equally to the story and time frame that existed at the time. If you fast forward a few hundred years later, the story of Hanukkah, the great miracle of Hanukkah, was in honor of the Jewish hero Hannah, who gave up literally risked her life to save the Jewish people of the time. If you again look at the story of Purim in Persia, the miracle happened because of Esther, Mordechai's niece, Esther, who integrated into the palace and persuaded the king, and thereby through Esther, a Jewish hero, a woman, together with children, specifically under the age of maturity, 12 and 13, were the heroes of the day. And I'll just conclude with this thought. We're trying to capture so much, but you ask such an important, essential question that everyone thinks about, especially when they look at observant Jews or clergy of faith-based organizations or religion. And there's that doubt or that suspicion of how those roles work or what we really believe. And a lot of it is unknown or distorted, and therefore I'm spending so much
distorted
time. I'm spending so much time on it.
Word.
But within that same Torah, it speaks about that karas habayis, that the woman is the one that will set the tone and nurture the family and the morals and ethics and the religious practices of the home. So Chanie mentioned that in the beginning, that we're not different, but we may have different roles and responsibilities. And the women and girls that take that seriously understand that, and that is more important in Judaism's opinion, especially Hasidic Judaism's teachings and philosophy, that God, holiness, education all start at home, not in the synagogue or in another faith-based facility. Hashem, Almighty God, or spirituality or respect and education begins at home, not in the school or synagogue. It continues there. It's essentially there as well, but that's not where Judaism is necessarily restricted to.
Yeah, we don't necessarily believe that the family that prays together stays together. We believe the family that eats dinner together stays together.
Exactly.
So yes, but also I just want to add that even though the woman in general is more, responsibilities are more at home, and the man, for example, his responsibilities might be more prayer, but women still take leadership positions within synagogues. They might not have positions within prayer service because that's not really the women's role as much, but women will take many within synagogues, within the different committees, giving classes, running programs is very much part of the women's leadership responsibilities as well.
I guarantee you that if Chanie would do the fundraising for Chabad UF here in Gainesville, we wouldn't be in debt.
Oh my gosh, I can't even believe this. Look what you have done to my truck.
Excuse me, it's your fault, it's not my fault.
Yes, it is your fault.
No,
I am calling Jeffrey Meldon from Meldon Law.
So I'm gonna call Jeffrey, my husband.
Meldon Law, this is Jeffrey speaking.
Jeffrey! This crazy lady here, this crazy lady, he might...
New client? Yes, but this one might be a little tricky.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Yeah, I love your answer, Rabbi, because showing the importance of where we need to start in any social topic right now, be it racism or just name it, it starts at home. And the way that you articulate the importance of that is spot on from my standpoint, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I apologize if I delved into something that maybe
It's
hit a nerve.
It's a subject that we don't speak about enough. On the other hand, people are sensitive or concerned about bringing the issue up for different reasons. It sounds judgmental, the question, or it sounds accusatory, or who knows.
People also have different views on equality. Not everyone. Some people think equality means that we all do the same thing. So it happens to be the Jewish view is not that we all do the same thing. In general, within the Jewish people, there are the priests in the temple, the Levites, the Israelites, the different tribes. Everyone had their own job. So if you're looking at the world as equality is everyone doing the same thing, you're not necessarily able to really understand Judaism perspective on different but equal.
I like the opportunity to do what somebody would want to do. I'm thinking now corporate America.
Yeah.
I'm shifting it from the religious side of it to
to channel their potential, to channel their strengths.
I have a daughter who 36 and single, climbing the corporate ladder, has her MBA, and I want her to have that same opportunity that a man at age 36 would have. If she wants to be the CEO of a company one day, I want her to have that opportunity to do that. We had Stephanie Stuckey on here a number of weeks ago. Stephanie Stuckey, if you've ever seen the Stuckey's restaurants and food stores around, her dad basically told her, she had her law degree. And the family business was kind of going under. It was countrywide at one time, and now it had narrowed down to less stores. And she wanted to take over the company and run it. And her dad said, "You couldn't run a lemonade stand." And that was his quote to her. And she basically showed him, "Baloney, Dad.
Yeah.
I can do this, and I'm going to do this." And she has done it. So that opportunity, going back in your world, how did you get onto this journey as a little kid? What got you onto this journey that you're on now?
So I was lucky. I was born and raised in New York, first generation American. My father's from Poland. My mother's from Belgium. And I was raised in a Jewish observant home. And my mother's family was connected to the previous Chabad Rebbe, and that's what steered our parents to send us to Lubavitch Chabad school system in New York, the iconic, famous Lubavitch World Headquarters, which stands strong and proud today as well at 770 Eastern Parkway. Millions of people know that address, which has spiritual significance as well. And that's where Lubavitch settled in the United States.
That
specific particular structure, and that's where the Rebbe's office was, and the previous Rebbe home upstairs, and it's
now a school?
It grew. There's a school. There's a large synagogue.
Okay.
It houses the headquarter offices for Chabad Lubavitch worldwide. But so I was lucky enough to be raised and sent and nurtured in the Chabad school system. And at one point, maybe I was thinking about being a police officer or a Met player, a pro Mets. I was a big Met fan in the 80s. But I think from when I was 16 or 17 years old, when I started to listen more intently to the Rebbe's talks, and it resonated, and I understood it more intellectually, and grew more passionate about the Rebbe's vision and view for the world and the responsibility for the Jewish people, for each other, for humanity at large. It resonated. And I think from the age of about 16, 17, I knew in my heart and mind that I would be honored and privileged to pursue that call. And I did, lucky enough. And met Chanie. She was teaching in a school. I was still studying and working in a central office in New York. when we were dating, we discussed, what our purpose and mission and what we would commit our lives to and our values. And it was aligned. We had a little differences of she wanted to work with college kids. I wanted to work more, had experience with families and children, but more or less, the destiny was in line, and she was as passionate and committed to this mission, so to speak, as I was, and that's how I ended up, so to speak, choosing together with Chanie what our path would be, that we would want to open another point of light, so to speak, another center for the worldwide Chabad movement, which is a very unique movement in terms of its hierarchy and structure. Each center is independently run and operated. Headquarters doesn't give us money. We don't give them money. There's sometimes seed money and things like that. But we are in line, and we are united in our philosophy, halachic standards, Jewish law standards, and mission. But each center, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory set this up this way, that each center is independently run and operated financially with its corporation, with its board of directors, which is an extremely unique model, a model that other organizations marvel at. The world marvels at it. Unconventional to the typical synagogue or international organization structure, and it's a blessing.
How many young people per semester do you impact at the University of Florida with your program?
Oh, I would say at least 1,000, maybe more. On our weekly Friday nights, we'll have 200 to 300 students who come and celebrate Shabbat with us. And then during the week, almost every night, we'll have a class, a social program, some program that brings Jewish students together. We do holiday programming for the community as well. So there's multiple opportunities for Jews to engage with their Judaism and reconnect. I think post-Holocaust, and part of the education of the Jews, or part of just learning the history and connecting to it, it lent to a bit of melancholy about Judaism, because you're Jewish. And if you look, I just taught a class last night, and we went through all the anti-Semitic events that happened throughout history, expelled from this country, expelled from that country, pogroms, and all these attempts at annihilation. And post-Holocaust, that was what young Jewish people were taught, and it gave them, they didn't have that excitement and that joy about Judaism. And I think part of our mission statement is that teach young people especially, and even older people, that Judaism is not just about, another anti-Semitic event, another, Jew was hit with eggs when they're walking down the street, but it's about the actual joy and excitement that's found within Judaism, because our entire, our history and our culture is just full of so many positive things, and we don't want it to get overshadowed by the negative. So we try to just infuse happiness and joy and excitement in all of our events and programs, and I think young people really respond to that.
How do my stepdaughter is in her 4th year here at the University of Florida, and I think of her. She was brought up in a very Southern Baptist world. How do the Jewish students at the University of Florida, how often do they bring somebody from outside of the Jewish world into those events? Oh. And what is that reaction like? And what is that whole process?
So first of all, there are many, the students who come to our events are not necessarily religious. They don't necessarily come from a background where they observe. Many of them have minimal Jewish education, or sometimes zero really connection to their roots. So it's an education for them as well. But yeah, we get messages all the time, because there are many classes at UF that it's mandatory to go visit a different religious organization or to partake in something that's culturally different. So I think just last week someone asked if they could come. I think they find it very, very, interesting and different, especially there's a dinner that's part of it. It's not just the actual...
I've heard many times, and I'll address it from another perspective as well, in addition to Chanie, that I've heard many times, our church doesn't do this, or why doesn't our church do this? So that's a compliment, and it's inspiring. Many students dorm or live with other students, their peers that are not Jewish or from a particular different faith or don't identify with any religion or faith, and they wonder where's David going on Friday night, and they ask, can we bring a friend, or they just want to see where their friends go or experience, like Chanie says, a Jewish event. And our events and services and programs are open to everyone. We actually have community-wide events. It's fascinating to think about, and the bedrock of American society and culture has always been, despite the good separation of church and state, when that's necessary and to protect everybody's beliefs and everything else, whenever a crisis, natural or other, I don't want to even mention, God forbid, and everybody should always be safe and protective, but a terrorist attack, a natural disaster, faith-based organizations were there for all of humanity, for every community, regardless of faith affiliation, level of observance, or identifying, in that matter, as a religious person at all, or with any religion. Not only has the communities and the cities and the states relied on the faith-based organization to respond in their way, not as first responders in terms of medical, nurturing life, saving life, preserving, but they relied on them as first responders for shelter, for food and clothing, for guidance, counseling in times of crisis.
Yeah, we saw this during COVID.
And that happens on a national scale, on each individual community scale, and then it translates to the individual. We get calls, and because of clergy privilege and privacy, we can't mention names or things like that. But when it came to COVID, our center, Chabad at UF, were the first ones locally. We distributed 2 rounds of 50,000 masks each round, free of charge. And it wasn't a monetary thing. People came from all levels of financial means, all neighborhoods and communities, responded and attended the free mask giveaway. We had preschools, we had nursing homes asking us for masks. There weren't any available. They didn't know how to shop on the internet. They were who knows what, but we were there responding. Truckloads of food, farms to family. We were the channel. The first 6 or 7 trucks locally was through Chabad at UF for the entire community, Jew and non-Jew alike. So you asked the question about attendance of the University of Florida students, but this really ties back to the community's responsibility for each other, clergy and faith-based organizations' role in the United States, and has always been there for celebrations, for times of life cycle events for the community, but unfortunately, we need it when it's needed, as first responders in its own way.
Yeah, I love to celebrate people's beliefs. If people have different beliefs, you get to celebrate that. And that's what I hear from you, is that the students that come, you're just celebrating life, basically, and helping people maybe find a different path. You've mentioned the Holocaust a couple of times, and tell us what Anne Frank, her stepsister, and you're bringing her to this area. Tell me about that event. Share that with me.
I would love to. I'm excited to, and I'll tell the audience why. We were, when I say we, Chabad at UF here in Gainesville, we're, so to speak, the first casualties of COVID in a lighter sense, thank God. We had to cancel our son's in-person bar mitzvah. We like just to encourage him, saying that he was the first COVID bar mitzvah on Zoom. Shmuley, we just had our second son's bar mitzvah within the COVID time frame, which was in person just a month ago, the end of January. But so we booked Eva Schloss, Anne Frank's stepsister, to come in March 2020. 4 months of excitement for her to arrive at the Phillips Center, open to the public. It was promising to be an amazing event. Everybody wants to hear, see, and feel her story, something that everyone that's able to attend should attend. And we have different opportunities for free tickets for high school students, college students. They're being sponsored by organizations, companies, and kind-hearted people, so students could hear her and see her and feel her story firsthand. There's only 1,650 seats at the Phillips Center. It's the largest space locally, and we hope that it's going to be a sellout crowd. So March 2020, the last 5 locations that she was supposed to visit, one of them were Gainesville. January, February, we saw the writing on the wall. For the safety of everyone, she went back home. She lives now in England, and we canceled the event. We are excited to announce on your show, one of the first, Bob, that she was rebooked. She's coming in 6 weeks, I believe, April 4th, 2022, at the Phillips Center. And she has a fascinating, important story to share firsthand. And just to touch on a serious dimension, it's not only about her story, but most or all Holocaust survivors naturally will not be with us physically in a very short period of time.
She's 92.
Yeah, she's still in good health, thank God, and she's able to come. She's been waiting anxiously. She promised that her first locations, if God will give her the strength and health, will be the 5 locations that she couldn't do at the start of COVID. And we're lucky to book her for Monday, April 4th, right here at the Phillips Center. But I just want to, it's not only about her story and to see, feel, and hear. And I want my own children to hear and see a living Holocaust survivor tell her or his story. And it is so important because I'm not only speaking about the Holocaust deniers, but see today, and I don't mean to, so much of our political discourse includes now distortions about the Holocaust for political purposes and other things. It's almost like an area where people that want to know about the Holocaust get to see and hear images that have no relation to the Holocaust, but because of the toxic political discourse in our society today, no matter which extreme you're part of, or hopefully none, just a balanced,
right down the middle,
healthy human being, is so important. I mean, take as an example an educated leader in our country, somebody that people look up to, and she's a friend of Jews, Whoopi Goldberg. She hosts a show, The View, or I get confused the names of the shows, but she innocently said that the Holocaust specifically was not about race. And everybody could go online. It was an international story a couple of weeks ago. Why am I mentioning this? Because Whoopi Goldberg is a friend of the Jews. I take her word for it. And I have no doubt that she's sincere. But take a look at the Mein Kampf, the manifesto of Hitler, Hitler's famous manifesto, Mein Kampf, speaks specifically that he wants to destroy the Jewish race, not made up by the Jews, but by Hitler himself stating it. And in 2022, fast forward 70 years later, Whoopi Goldberg innocently and honestly, so to speak, can sit there and say that she has to see race, for her race is only about color, is an ignorance that's, I don't know, of course it's forgivable. If a person doesn't know something, you have to educate them, but shows how important this Eva Schloss event is at the Phillips Center, April 4th, when hopefully another 1,500 people could hear and see what the human race, and Jews specifically, experienced in the Holocaust through Hitler, may his name be erased forever's hands and will.
I think that the issue with something that Whoopi Goldberg said just out of ignorance is that it plays into the actual real anti-Semitism that exists, because it legitimizes whatever issues they have or Holocaust deniers. And really why I think this event is very important, because like I mentioned before, all the way in the beginning, there's so many people who have no idea what the Holocaust is, no idea what Auschwitz is, don't know that 6 million Jews were killed. And it's important to bring this to the forefront and make sure that people are aware of the type of annihilation, the type of atrocity that can happen when there's ignorance and when there's hate. And if there's one person who people have studied about or who have read about that's connected to the Holocaust, it's Anne Frank. That would be, I remember in Gainesville years ago, was like the book of the year, the book of the month was Anne Frank. And they might not even remember exactly what it is, but if they see Anne Frank, then they would want to come and hear her stepsister, who knew her when she was younger, and then after Anne Frank was killed, Anne's father married Eve's mother. So she has that connection to her. So Anne Frank, being this central name connected to the Holocaust, is a very important figure that can enable people to be educated about the Holocaust. And Eva Schloss is the one who's accommodating that and who's enabling this education.
Bob, I must say this, and if the audience will allow me to indulge just for another moment of this, today's day and age, we're still speaking about random hate against a particular demographic of people, color, ethnicity, religion. You would think it's 1,000 years ago. You would think it's 100 years ago. You would think it's pre-World War II, yet those elements still exist. No one wakes up in Gainesville, Florida, or Charlottesville, Virginia, on a random Tuesday or Thursday morning or Friday and says, let me go kill a Jew. Let me go hate so-and-so. I don't like black. I don't like white. I don't like Asian. It doesn't work that way, Bob. You and I know that. Your audience knows that. Education, education, education. I can't say it enough. Education doesn't start with a security camera of or an armed guard in front of synagogues in Pittsburgh or in Texas or in Jerusalem or in Argentina, or at a black church in Virginia or in North Carolina. It starts in the homes, in the schools, what music the children listen to, the conversations their parents have. And we cannot emphasize enough an event like this or the real root of where hate, bias, anti-Semitism, or a Holocaust starts and comes from.
Where do people get tickets?
EvaUF.com. That's www.evauf.com. There's general admission tickets, there's premium tickets, there's VIP packages, all to make it possible for college students, high school students to get their free tickets, and everyone else to be empowered, educated, and to see, hear, and feel a historic event firsthand.
One of the things that you mentioned in that last part was all of the different areas that I'll refer to it as hate. And we seem to have crossed a line in hate. I mean, we're now murdering the people that are supposed to be, protecting us, our police officers, and if it's Jewish, if it's black, if it's whatever it is, there seems to be a hate. In the last couple of minutes we have, share with me, in your view, from the religious standpoint, what can we do to erase that hate?
I just want to say something before he ends. I think it goes back to your original discussion about leadership. A lot of the hate that's coming down and why we see all of this anger and hate is a lot of it is coming from on top. But when we have leadership, then instead of creating this type of hatred and animosity, instead they're creating this love and togetherness and acceptance and tolerance.
But it's money too.
Yeah. So we need to find,
our political world.
Yes.
It's the money. They will say and do anything to gain control. Yes. Which brings in more money.
Including bringing out hate in people, which once you bring out hate, you create this mob mentality. And then you have people. So we have to, within our own communities, we need to create this positive leadership.
I'd like to take this maybe somewhere much deeper.
We have
Yes.
about 2.5 minutes,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
see how deep you
they
can
say
get it.
they say the story about the rabbi that only had they would have to, the sermon shouldn't last forever, so he would take a little candy and put it in his mouth, and he knew when the candy went down, he has to stop. It was a 2-minute candy. Today, Bob, on the way in, I thought it was candies. It was a bowl of pebbles. It hasn't.
It hasn't broken.
I'll be brief, but I think we should take this to a very important place, and that is that society itself, within the education that we discuss, the importance of education, which begins at home, of course in school as well, but it begins at home. The value of the individual life. We see today suicide rate, not only in the youth, which had extraordinary numbers it started a number of years ago, and now we see it within the medical community, within the young professional community, within the Hollywood community. The value of their own life, a person's life, their value to society, how they contribute. If there would be more emphasis placed in those areas, if somebody values their own life and purpose, perhaps even if, God forbid, they were educated to harbor hate or animosity or anti-Semitism or evil against others, there would be a sense of the sanctity and importance of life if they would have more dignity and value their own life. And I want to conclude with one more concept that the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, which we spoke so much about, always encouraged our society, and specifically in the United States, looking at school shootings and other areas, where he encouraged, and now in Florida it was actually enacted in law, a moment of silence. And if you think about what I just said, that is the fabric that needs to be sewed into our children, our peers, our society, where each day in school or at work, we're not telling you what to think about or what to believe or whose God to follow. Believe me, there's only one God. If there would be more than one God, we'd all be in trouble. But on a serious note, the Rebbe's call for a moment of silence, the idea was each person closes their eyes, male, female, girl and boy, precious souls created in his image. You close your eyes for 5 minutes, for 1 minute, 60 seconds a day, without any interference or influence. Who am I? Who created me? What's my purpose today? A moment of introspection, a moment of silence, a moment of feeling that this is not a jungle, that I have a purpose, that I was created by what, by who. Let that resonate with each individual on their own terms. I promise you, we will live in a society here and everywhere where there will be less killing, less hate, less mayhem, more peace and tranquility for the world over.
Thank you, Rabbi. There's nothing more I can say towards this. This podcast took a different road today, which I'm glad it went down. And it took a road that we haven't gone on before. And I'm so glad that we were. Chanie and Rabbi.
Bob, your audience did not hear anything about matzo ball soup, about brisket. Next show.
Yes, corned beef sandwiches. I've got to. We should be having that coming up sometime.
We spoke about spiritual nourishment.
I always love our rabbi in Valdosta. That he always, for our Rotary Club, he was always the one that promoted that, and we helped him and did that. So,
Thank God.
Thank you so very much for being here. From
Thank you.
Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, Celebration Point, inside the Coach's Podcast Room. For Evan Miller, our producer, this is Motivation U, the podcast.